It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. The Mark Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Mark is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Mark Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. And this is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And thanks for tuning in on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio, and also on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live and the other Facebook Lives we have running. You're welcome to comment on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live, and we'll try to read your comment on the air. If you'd like to watch prior podcasts of the show or read any of my columns on Penn Live or take a look at some great merchandise, including our popular Right to Bear Arms muscle shirt and the We're Glad You're Our Neighbor, Just Please Don't Kill Us yard signs. And by the way, we have those same We're Glad You're Our Neighbor, Just Please Don't Kill Us slogans on T-shirts, which apparently is our number one seller of items of merchandise that we have on the MarkScaringiShow.com website. So you're welcome to take a look and look at that merchandise. And if you'd like to, you can order there. For more political and legal news throughout the course of the week, don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Well, last week we had our friend, the political analyst Charlie Giroux of Quantum Communications and CBS 21's Face the State. He and I discussed the state of the Democratic presidential primary contest. And we'll do more of that today since we had the introduction of Mike Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York City, at the raucous in Sin City, Las Vegas, Nevada Democratic presidential debate. And we'll also talk about the debate and the Nevada caucus tonight. But first, I want to talk briefly about a titanic battle yours truly just had with the Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania over the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, the right to free speech. And this garnered a tremendous amount of media attention since Friday of last week, when we sent a demand letter on behalf of two of my clients. We'll talk about that, and the Lieutenant Governor has given his official response now. And I am now, through the law firm, Scaringi Law, I have now given my response to the Lieutenant Governor's response to our demand letter. And so here it is. The Scaringi Law clients, Jason Lindemuth and Sean Guay, achieve a big victory for the First Amendment over Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. Now, on February 14th, 2020, yours truly, on behalf of his clients, Mr. Lindemuth and Mr. Guay of Harrisburg and Hummelstown, respectively, sent the Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman a demand, giving him 7 days to unblock them from his Twitter account. The handle is @JohnFetterman, on the grounds that such blocking violates the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Otherwise, the two men would file a lawsuit compelling the Lieutenant Governor to unblock them from his Twitter account. Now, in response, a defiant Lieutenant Governor told media outlets that he would absolutely not unblock them. On Thursday, February 20, 1 day before the expiration of that 7-day deadline that we gave him, the Lieutenant Governor folded. He unblocked Mr. Lindemuth and Mr. Guay, and those two men are very pleased that they are victorious in their challenge to the Lieutenant Governor over their right to free speech. Mr. Lindemuth and Mr. Guay are true champions of the First Amendment. Now, in conjunction with this unblocking, the Lieutenant Governor issued a statement to me, yours truly. The Lieutenant Governor stated, "You and your clients appear willing to squander taxpayer resources in this frivolous endeavor. In this and in every instance, my first instinct is to avoid this waste whenever possible." Now, I responded, the Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman possibly and perhaps unwittingly acknowledged that he intended to use the resources of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to defend himself from the threatened lawsuit. If, as the lieutenant governor previously asserted, his Twitter account is private or personal and not a de facto government account, then he should not use government resources to defend against the threatened lawsuit. He should use his personal resources to defend what he claims is a private or personal Twitter account. If the lieutenant governor is concerned about the use of taxpayer resources by the judicial branch in adjudicating this dispute, that concern could have been, and apparently has been, easily avoided by the lieutenant governor simply unblocking the two men. And it was the lieutenant governor and not the Scaringi Law clients who risked using taxpayer resources to resolve this easily resolvable issue. Now, the lieutenant governor further stated, your client's unblocked status will be revisited if they again target my family with unwelcome postings on my personal Twitter account. And I, yours truly, responded, the lieutenant governor's unsued status will be revisited again if he blocks my clients from his de facto government Twitter account again. The law is clear, and now thanks to Lieutenant Governor Fetterman's statement and conduct, the facts are even clearer that the handle @John Fetterman is a de facto government Twitter account, and as such, any action by the lieutenant governor to block my clients or any other person who wishes to communicate on his Twitter would violate the First Amendment free speech rights to the United States Constitution. Now, the lieutenant governor also stated, I'm neither offering nor requesting an apology and consider this matter to be closed. I responded, well, we do not consider this matter to be closed. The lieutenant governor made statements to the media that have harmed my clients' reputations. The lieutenant governor stated to Penn Live, Mr. Lindemuth proactively tagging my wife to shame her is disappointing and deeply uncivil. Our response is that is an untrue statement. Mr. Lindemuth made a post on his own Facebook page and did not tag the second lady to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And then for whatever reason, the lieutenant governor apparently went on to Mr. Lindemuth's Facebook page, copied or took a screenshot of this post, placed it onto his own Twitter feed, tagged Mr. Lindemuth, tagged the second lady, his own wife, and tweeted it, along with a comment about my client, to the lieutenant governor's 48,000 Twitter followers to see. Who does that? It was the lieutenant governor who tagged his constituent and his own wife. If my client's Facebook post shamed the lieutenant governor's wife, why would the lieutenant governor tweet it out to his 48,000 followers? In any event, my client did not intend and did not shame our second lady. Mr. Lindemuth replied to the governor's tweet explaining that he was not shaming the second lady. The tweet automatically replied to her as a result of the lieutenant governor's having tagged her on his original tweet. Furthermore, the lieutenant governor stated on Pittsburgh Action News 4, if someone attacks my spouse or children or spreads hateful speech or rhetoric, I just block them as a matter of policy. And I responded, neither Mr. Lindemuth nor Mr. Guay attacked the lieutenant governor's spouse, his children, or spread hateful speech or rhetoric. Now, in another interview, the lieutenant governor accused my other client, Mr. Guay, of engaging in Islamophobic dog whistling and linking to a blog post that detailed anti-Islamic racist and hateful rhetoric. And I'll tell you what my response was to the lieutenant governor. When we return from this brief commercial break, you're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Now, more of Mark Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to The Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And we have an important political and legal issue of the day. We have been engaged in some sort of what some are calling a Twitter feud or a Twitter spat with the Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. My clients asserting their First Amendment rights to free speech, meaning they have the right under the United States Constitution to communicate with the Lieutenant Governor on the Lieutenant Governor's Twitter handle, we've taken the position that that Twitter handle is a de facto government account because of the manner in which the way the lieutenant governor uses that account to communicate with his constituents concerning matters before the Pardons Board of Pennsylvania. Our lieutenant governor sits as the chairman of the Pardons Board. And also, the lieutenant governor has communicated with constituents, does so on a regular basis, concerning various matters that he believes are important to him, political issues, legislative issues, announcements of his support for various proposals of the Wolf-Fetterman administration. So the lieutenant governor is using his Twitter account as a de facto government account, communicating with his constituents. He did not like and disagreed with, one assumes, a post or two made by two clients of mine concerning a tweet that the governor put out talking about the second lady of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, perhaps being the first second lady to be a carnival dancer. That tweet engendered various responses from various constituents. Two of my clients were engaged in responding to the Twitter account. One actually didn't respond directly to the Twitter posting. Instead, he just made a post on his Facebook. But our lieutenant governor, I'm not sure why he was spending his time in this way, but he went on to my client's Twitter page, scooped up the post that my client made about the lieutenant governor's original post about the second lady being the first second lady carnival dancer, and the lieutenant governor tweeted it out along with a comment about my client to his 48,000 Twitter followers. The lieutenant governor then made statements to the media that my client was shaming his wife or shaming women, and that's not the case at all. And we had to respond because, and most importantly, the lieutenant governor blocked these two gentlemen, these two constituents of his, from continuing to access his Twitter account. So they could no longer communicate with the lieutenant governor on this issue and any other issue that the lieutenant governor chose to speak about. So it was essentially an act of the government blocking speech. My clients were not happy about that. They want to engage in free speech. They want to communicate with the lieutenant governor about the important issues of the day. However, they were blocked. And so they got with me, and we sent a demand letter. Last Friday, we sent the letter, a week ago from this past Friday, and gave the lieutenant governor 7 days to unblock my clients and apologize. He did not apologize. Initially, he said absolutely no, I will not unblock them, and that he accused them of shaming his wife, of shaming women. He made some other characterizations about one of the two gentlemen being Islamophobic and engaging in dog whistling and such. And so for the past week, we've been responding to various statements the lieutenant governor has been making in the media about this issue and about my clients. And ultimately, the lieutenant governor caved on the Thursday before the deadline, the Friday deadline. He unblocked my clients and issued a statement directly to me through someone's Twitter handle, by the way, or through a reporter. And I have been now reading my statement that responds to the lieutenant governor. And we also threatened the lieutenant governor that we would consider bringing a defamation claim against him for the statements that he made about my two clients that harmed their reputation in the community. And we talked about the one statement about Mr. Lindemuth shaming women when he did no such thing, and the other comment about Mr. Guay engaging in Islamophobic dog whistling and linking to a blog post that detailed anti-Islamic, racist, and hateful rhetoric. Now, I responded in my statement that the lieutenant governor should know that Mr. Guay is not racist or Islamophobic. He does not fear or hate Muslims. He married one. Mr. Guay's wife, Yasmin Farzana, immigrated to the United States from Bangladesh, a Muslim-majority country. Mrs. Guay is a proud Muslim American of the Islamic faith. Like the lieutenant governor is proud of his wife's culture and heritage, his wife's culture embracing Carnival. His wife is from Brazil, and the lieutenant governor is rightly proud of her and her accomplishments. But likewise, Mr. Gui is proud of his wife's culture and heritage, being a Muslim American and practicing the Islamic faith. Yet the lieutenant governor accused my client of engaging in Islamophobic dog whistling. So a little ironic, one would think. Perhaps the lieutenant governor would like to meet my client's wife, a proud Muslim American, and learn more from her. She could teach him much about the Muslim culture and the Islamic faith. And I continued in my statement by stating that Mr. Lindemuth, and now due to the lieutenant governor's recent statements, Mr. Gui, are still considering their options concerning a possible defamation action against the lieutenant governor. And perhaps such a lawsuit could be avoided if the lieutenant governor reached out to his two constituents, tried to get to know them and to understand what they think are the important issues for the lieutenant governor to spend his time addressing. And after all, that was the issue that my clients were raising with the lieutenant governor on his Twitter account, that perhaps there are more important things for the lieutenant governor to be spending his time on. There are more important issues confronting the people of Pennsylvania than whether or not his wife is the first second lady to have been a carnival dancer. And that's really what started all of this. That's why we're here today. And the lieutenant governor blocked my clients because of those comments, and due to our threat to sue him, has now unblocked them. And after all, the lieutenant governor represents all of the people of Pennsylvania, even my two clients, even those Pennsylvanians with whom he disagrees. And the last thing I want to say about this issue is this. Although Mr. Lindemuth and Mr. Gui, my two clients involved in this Twitter dispute and championing the First Amendment and their rights to free speech, although they may disagree with the lieutenant governor as to what makes Pennsylvania great, they and we can all agree that Pennsylvania has a lovely, accomplished, successful, and indeed a great second lady in Giselle Fetterman. So there you have it. There's my statement responding to the lieutenant governor caving because of our demand that he will be sued if he does not unblock my clients from his Twitter account. So there you have it, hot off the press. And you're welcome to call in 717-540-0580 or comment live. I know we have some callers here. We'll open up the phone lines, and we'll hear Mike from Boiling Springs. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Hi, Mark. Good afternoon. Most of the conversation regarding the justice system evolves about the slapdown of Shapiro versus your pal Fetterman. And the real scandal out there is the parole board. 8 members who nobody knows if it's 8-0 that they vote or 6-2 or 7-1. And they release haphazardly murderers, rapists, lock, stock, and barrel. 2 months ago, we had a police officer killed, 2 toddlers murdered, a woman murdered, numerous rapes. And where's the media? And where's the Judiciary Committee?
Well, those are very good points that you bring up, and perhaps those are some of the issues that our lieutenant governor should be spending his time addressing rather than engaging in this Twitter spat and posting a photograph of his wife in her carnival costume. But very, very valid points, Mike, from Boiling Springs. I'll have to research those, and perhaps I can give you a good answer the next time on the show next week.
Appreciate it.
All right,
Thank
Mike.
you.
Mike from Boiling Springs. Thanks for calling, bringing up some very interesting and newsworthy points. We'll have to research the issues that he addressed and perhaps have some answers for him on next week's show. So that was how I've been spending my past week involved in this really titanic struggle with the second in command of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania on the free speech rights of my clients. So it's a good day for the First Amendment here in Pennsylvania, and thanks to really the bravery and courage of these two men, Mr. Jason Lindemuth and Mr. Sean Gui, really stuck out their necks And they took it on the chin. The lieutenant governor responded and had a lot to say about them in his response to the simple issue, which is the lieutenant governor is operating his Twitter account as if it were a government account. He's discussing government business. He's discussing his role as lieutenant governor. He's discussing his partnership with the governor. Even Governor Wolf, when he was announcing his gratitude to the lieutenant governor on his marijuana legalization efforts and the support they have for legislation to do so, even the governor of Pennsylvania used the @JohnFetterman Twitter handle to tweet to him. So even our own governor, when he's tweeting out an official statement of his support for the lieutenant governor, is using his de facto government account, and that's the account that the people of Pennsylvania apparently enjoy being able to utilize to communicate with this elected official and other elected officials across Pennsylvania. And so hopefully we have put this particular matter on the free speech rights of the people of Pennsylvania to bed. Hopefully it will remain there. And elected officials across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, who I know many of whom have been closely following this illegal spat we've had with the lieutenant governor, will open up their Twitter accounts, undoubtedly their official government accounts. They cannot block constituents from communicating there, but also if they're using their personal Twitter accounts, as many of them do, as essentially as a de facto government account, if they're using their personal accounts to communicate with the good people of Pennsylvania, and they're inviting replies, they're inviting feedback, they're inviting commentary on what they're commenting on, then they have to do the right thing, resist the temptation to be authoritarian and tyrannical, resist the temptation to block and stop and muzzle free speech. You got to resist that temptation. You've got to let speech flow. More speech is good speech, and that is the important political and legal issue of the day that yours truly has been spending his past week and a half on. We're going to move now on the next part of the show into the Democratic presidential debate that occurred in Las Vegas, Nevada. And we'll talk about the Democratic primaries, which candidates up, which candidates down, which candidates do you support out there in my listenership. Thanks for listening here to the Mark Scoringi Show. We're going to take a brief commercial break. We'll be back right after this.
Let's get back to the Mark Scoringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scoringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. We've talked about the Twitter feud of the year here between our clients from Scoringi Law and the Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania. And now we're going to talk about another feud that broke out on the debate stage in Las Vegas and is spreading to the early caucus and primary states. The feud between the leading candidates for the Democratic Party's nomination for president of the United States. Well, the debate in Las Vegas, I'm not sure how many of my listeners watched the debate, but it turned out to be a real Donnybrook. We witnessed for the first time the entrance of former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg to the debate stage, and boy, was he walloped. Talking heads from both the left and right agree that Mike Bloomberg turned in one of the worst debate performances in recent history. The liberal Daily Beast wrote, Bloomberg spends hundreds of millions of dollars to get his you-know-what kicked. Liberal MSNBC talk show host Chris Matthews, remember he's the man who got the thrill up his leg listening to Barack Obama speak, he said of Bloomberg, it kept bleeding. He's talking about his wounds, his injuries that he sustained from the other Democratic presidential candidates. It kept bleeding and bleeding. He had no way to stop it, as if he were a prize fighter getting knocked down and then knocked out by the other Democratic candidates. Liberal CNN wrote, it's unanimous, a horrible night for Bloomberg. Well, right out of the gates, the former mayor of New York City was rhetorically mugged by Elizabeth Warren. Liberal CNN commentator Van Jones compared Bloomberg to the Titanic, meeting Warren, the iceberg that sunk the Titanic Bloomberg candidacy on that debate stage in Las Vegas, Nevada. She was chomping at the bit, Elizabeth Warren, that is, to get at him. And, boy, she could barely hold herself back. She injected herself into the very first debate question that wasn't to her, but she was raising her hand trying to get in there. The question was directed to Bernie Sanders and to Mike Bloomberg, and was the basic question, who is more likely to beat Donald Trump? Well, Elizabeth Warren got in there, and she said, and this is now going to go down as one of the more famous lines in presidential debates. She said, "I'd like to talk about who we're running against, a billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. No, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg." Oh, Jesus. And he just stood there with that kind of wry look on his face, not much expression other than that. And he just kind of stared and blinked into the camera. He had no response to that. And then she went on. That was just the opening line of her salvo. And just wiping the floor with him. And he doesn't even respond, doesn't even attempt to respond after being scalped by the former Native American, Elizabeth Warren. And that's interesting that she is the former Native American, because for the first part of her career, she declared herself to be a Native American. And in the latter part of her career, more recently, she announced she is not a Native American. And so I guess she's the former Native American. In any event, the moderator, Lester Holt, he didn't even ask Bloomberg to respond. Strangely, he moved off of that and asked Amy Klobuchar, the candidate who has zero chance of winning. He got Amy Klobuchar into the debate, and I thought that was interesting. If I were the moderator and I just witnessed Elizabeth Warren just taking a hatchet to Mike Bloomberg, I think I might ask Mike Bloomberg to respond, but oddly, the moderator goes over to Amy Klobuchar. In any event, the Mike Bloomberg just flopped. I mean, that man should have defended himself, or at least deflected in the expert way that Donald Trump deflected the same attack launched by Megyn Kelly in one of the early debates in the 2016 presidential primaries. And you all remember that one, where Megyn Kelly went after the president saying, "You call women dogs and fat pigs," and Trump immediately realized that he was being slimed. And so, remember, he kind of stood up, put his chest out, and interjected, stopped the questioner, stopped Megyn Kelly, and said, "Only Rosie O'Donnell," and got a huge laugh line. So right there, that shows you the instincts of then candidate Trump. He immediately realized, and remember, Megyn Kelly prior to that was very friendly with Donald Trump. They had multiple interviews. She was on Fox News, and Fox News was friendly to the Trump campaign. No question about that. So he's probably expecting, the president's probably expecting, then candidate Trump was expecting probably more of a softball question. But boy, the knives were out for him. Within the first few words of her question, Trump realized that she's going after him. She's trying to knock his legs out. She's trying to kneecap him with this slime ball type question. And he deflects expertly and gets a huge laugh and really takes some of the punch out of Megyn Kelly's question. Now compare that and contrast to Mike Bloomberg being rhetorically assaulted by Elizabeth Warren on essentially the same thing, what he calls women, and Bloomberg just stands there and does nothing, not even a peep. Now, imagine Bloomberg now on the debate stage with Donald Trump. You don't think Donald Trump's going to come at Mike Bloomberg like a wrecking ball? And what's Bloomberg going to do? Is he going to cower in the corner the way he cowered to Elizabeth Warren? Wow, that was absolutely stunning. Well, and there's plenty of material there for Bloomberg to go at Elizabeth Warren. How about the fact that her entire career is premised upon the lie that she's a Native American? How about that for one? And there's so much more to attack Elizabeth Warren on. her multiple falsehoods and exaggerations about her career and her resume are one of the reasons why she lost her front-runner status. You think Bloomberg would have realized that? You think he would have gotten all of those facts straight about all of her embellishments, exaggerations, and outright lies about who she is and where she comes from, and would have had those ready to go and would have unleashed those on her. But no, nothing. All right, moving on. And by the way, Bernie, we heard a lot from Bernie Sanders, and I was just taking some time to focus in, because you watch Bernie and he's almost like a cartoon character of himself. You think of Larry David, the comedic actor, and you think of the skits on Saturday Night Live where he impersonates Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders is just so full of it and so wrong on every issue that I don't really pay much attention to him. But I did last night, and he describes what he's doing as a revolution, which is a very scary word and one that we're not used to hearing among American politicians. We try not to have revolutions in America because they can be rather bloody, as history will inform us. He also uses the word movement, that he is leading a movement. Now, who's in his movement? The working class. Well, the working class, who does he mean by the working class? He says in his movement, he says the working class, and then he goes through this litany of hyphenated Americans, African Americans, Native Americans, there's Elizabeth Warren's constituency, Asian Americans. So it's the working class and hyphenated Americans. That's who Bernie Sanders is appealing to. That's his constituency. That's who he's leading. And that phrase, I've always been concerned about utilizing the phrase working class in politics, because remember, classes, it really connotes Marxism. Karl Marx, Frederick Engels, the Communist Manifesto, Marxist political theory, Marxist-Leninist political theory is about the class system, the bourgeoisie, for example, the proletariat. So here we have Bernie Sanders talking about the working class. He's hearkening back to really what he's all about, what he studied, what he learned, what he embraced, which is Marxism. And so Bernie Sanders will lead the working class. And by the way, I'm sure the working class does not mean me. Likely the working class does not mean many, if any, of my listeners. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I work pretty darn hard, and I've worked very, very hard my entire life, and I've worked harder in my life, I'm sure of this, than Bernie Sanders has in his life. Bernie Sanders has been on the government dole for the majority of his life, not producing anything but rhetoric, not producing anything but hot air. And I, for one, get a little bit offended when his constituents are described as the working class, and I guess I'm not. I guess I don't work. I guess I don't get up and go to work every day. So Bernie using Marxist-Leninist phraseology to define what his movement is and who he who are his supporters and who he is leading, that's not good for our country. We don't want class strife or class warfare, politically or otherwise. But that's what Bernie Sanders seems to be promising us in America today. We'll talk more about the Democratic presidential debates when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Now back to The Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. We're talking about the Democratic presidential debates. We just heard from our Democratic presidential candidates, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Mike Bloomberg, Joe Biden, Mayor Pete, and Amy Klobuchar. They took the debate stage in Sin City, Las Vegas, Nevada. We've heard we heard a lot. We heard from Bernie Sanders and his working class warfare rhetoric. I feel like he's coming after me, and I'm sure he's coming after you. I do get somewhat offended when I guess I'm not part of the working class, and only Bernie works. He's the leader of the workers, and the man hasn't worked a day in his life. What is Sanders' agenda? Guaranteed health care, the right to health care for everyone, $15 per hour minimum wage, and he wants to take on the fossil fuel industry. And the interesting thing about Bernie Sanders' proposal for guaranteed health care and his repeated declaration that health care is a human right, that has been repeated by probably, I think, all of the Democratic presidential candidates, is, of course, that's absurdly wrong. There is no such thing as a fundamental right to health care. You don't have the right to compel a doctor or a nurse or a dentist or any other healthcare professional to provide health care to you. You can't, you have no right to compel them against their will to do so. And that's what Bernie means when he says we have a right to health care. No, we don't. We have the right to ask and request that healthcare professionals provide health care to us, and if they want to charge us, we have to pay the charge if we want the health care. If we can't afford to pay for the health care, then we've got to go on and find some sort of government program or government assistance where the government can pay for the health care provided voluntarily by healthcare professionals. This is something that Bernie Sanders just does not understand. The idea of the fundamental constitutional rights of the American people is founded on the premise of we have the right to be free from government interference in our lives in various and sundry ways. For example, our Second Amendment right is the right to be free from the government coming in and taking away or blocking or preventing us from bearing arms. The First Amendment, the government is a right against the government coming in and blocking us on a de facto government Twitter account. Our understanding of in our history with the fundamental rights or the constitutional rights of the American people is not the right to something. It's not the right to compel someone to give you a medical checkup. And Bernie Sanders has flipped that. He's flipped what the whole American jurisprudence and understanding of constitutional rights is on its head. And how about this guaranteed health care? Oh, and we've got some callers here. I just noticed, and you know what? Let's get to some of these callers before I continue to give you my thoughts on the Democratic presidential debate, because we want to hear from you. Ellen from Hanover, you're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Oh, thanks, Mark. I wanted to make some comments about the debate and perhaps Democrat Party in general.
Please do.
I don't think poor Mr. Bloomberg could have done anything right, even though he really had no answer to those things, because he was basically an advocate for capitalism. And when he said the socialist system has never worked anywhere, he got shouted down, in effect.
Yeah, I thought that was one of his better lines. I thought he had a few decent lines. That was one of them. And when he was talking about business growth and development in the African-American community, the man obviously understands how to do it. And so there he was good, but everywhere else he bombed. But go ahead.
Yes. Historically, the Democrat Party has been authoritarian, and the fact that Pennsylvania is still a blue state, at least it tips back and forth, came from FDR, and he was the original quid pro quo man, because he gave the state a lot of money and got votes in return, and it's been that way ever since. And so if anybody thinks that there can be any kind of peaceful Democrat socialism, the whole system, the communist system is authoritarian, and it kind of follows in line there, and nothing can be changed in terms of the government taking over things without using force. So people who are these naive Democrats out there who don't understand history and don't understand what socialism and communism really are. I just hope they become aware and alert.
Yeah, very good points. And Bernie Sanders is a big proponent of his Medicare for All program. And even and once that is, if that is ever implemented, and hopefully it never will be, but essentially, I mean, doctors and healthcare professionals will not work for the government. Instead, they will have to accept government payment for the healthcare services that they provide. So, kind of de facto, they'll be employed by the government because the government will be their paymaster, and that is going to cause professionals to flee the medical field
Yes.
because they don't like dealing with Medicare and Medicaid as it is today. Many doctors will not take Medicaid at all because the reimbursement rates are so low. And if we have a Medicare for all, that means our government's going to be the paymaster to all healthcare professionals for all healthcare that's provided. And of course, the government's going to pay as little as they can because the government is bankrupt. And so these doctors who I feel for, who borrow hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to college and medical school and get advanced training and advanced education far beyond me, far beyond most of my friends and most of the people I know. They've worked so hard, and they're out there in the field doing so much good, healing the sick, and look what's going to happen to them. They're going to get ratcheted down by the government. You and I are going to get rationed care. We're going to have to wait in long, long lines to see our doctor, to see a specialist, and those docs aren't going to be able to give us the full panoply of medical services that they think we need and we want because the government's holding the money, and the government's not going to part with the money, and they're going to drive down as far as they can the reimbursement to healthcare professionals, and it's going to drive down the quality of care that you and I receive. Ellen from Hanover, did I exhaust you there with my response?
Oh, no, that was very good. That hits home to everybody, I think. This romanticism about what socialism really is always accompanied by violence or
That's right.
Force one way or another, and sooner or later. So.
You said it. You got it. Ellen from Hanover, thanks for calling. Right on point. And government will take over our healthcare system by being the paymasters to the medical professionals. They'll get paid less, so there will be fewer involved in the system. They'll be less happy, more disgruntled dealing with government paymasters. You and I will get less care, more ration care, and the health system ultimately will collapse financially because the government is broker than broke and is making this just crazy promise of Medicare for all that's going to cost in the tens of trillions of dollars. And where is that money? Where is it? And by the way, the government made us another promise, Social Security and Medicare for the elderly, which, by the way, has unfunded liabilities of over $100 trillion. So we are broker than broke, and yet Bernie Sanders, this loony leftist who's never run a business in his life, who's never run anything, let alone a health insurance company, let alone a doctor's office, knows nothing, practically speaking, about medicine, healthcare, or health insurance, knows nothing, has never, ever done anything, practically speaking, in the field in which he wants to take over, govern, and regulate. Think about that. That is remarkable to me. And even Mike Bloomberg had a good response to these candidates by saying, am I the only person here who's ever run a business? And yes, the answer is yes. These people are up on that stage. Elizabeth Warren has never run anything but her mouth. Nothing. Joe Biden has been in elected office since I was 3 or 4 years old. He's never run a business. Has Joe Biden ever run a healthcare company? Has he ever run an insurance company? Has he ever been a doctor or a nurse or a dentist? What does he know about healthcare? I mean, he is the cheerleader of Obamacare. Obamacare was the brainchild of Barack Obama, who he himself never ran a business, was never involved in healthcare, never treated a wound, never ran an insurance company or even was involved in healthcare. And yet Barack Obama proposed Obamacare, which turned out to be an absolute failure. We provide health insurance to our employees over at the law firm. Obamacare came out, boom, canceled. They canceled us repeatedly. So we're spending how many hours dealing with insurance companies constantly canceling our health insurance plans? Our premiums went up dramatically after Obamacare. It's a disaster. You would think that a reasonable, rational human being would witness the desolation and the implosion of Obamacare and say to himself, well, you know what? Something I fought so hard for many years has been in effect for several years now. It's been an absolute disaster. So, you know what? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the government really shouldn't be involved in trying to control one of the largest industries in the United States of America. Maybe we should let the free market. Maybe we should let doctors and dentists and patients work out the health care needs that they want and need in their lives. In any event, that really just kind of gets me going, that you've got these people who've never done anything trying to control us. Well, that's about all the time we have for the Mark Scaringi Show. Thanks for listening. Tune in every Saturday, 1 o'clock on WHP.